Water is a chemical composed of hydrogen and oxygen. Water is the most important biochemical of all, because without water, life would not exist on the planet. It is important for two reasons. Number one, it is a major component of cells, typically forming between 70 and 95% of the mass of the cell. You are about 60% water, and most of the chemical reaction can only be possible if you have the right content of water in your body. For example, the cytoplasm of a cell is mostly water, and chemical reaction can only be possible if there is the right amount of water in them. Water provides a medium for most of the chemical reactions. Specifically, they are taking place inside the cytoplasm. It provides an environment for those organisms that live in water. For example, aquatic organism. 3/4 of the planet is covered in water. Now we explain some of the properties of water, and among them, water is a solvent. Number one. Okay. Water is said to be the universal solvent because there is no other solvent on the planet that could dissolve as much solute in it as the water. So water is an excellent solvent for ions and polar molecules. Water itself is a polar. Okay, therefore polar solutes readily dissolves in water, and non-polar solutes cannot dissolve in water, because the water molecules are attracted to ions and polar molecules. This happens when a chemical dissolves in water. Once a chemical is in solution, it is free to move about and react with other chemicals. Non-polar molecules such as lipids are insoluble in water, and if surrounded by water, tend to be pushed together by water, since water molecules are attracted to each other. Now we explain water is a transport medium. Okay, you might be familiar with the fact that water is transported from the soil to other parts of the body in plants. Okay, so it provides medium for transportation, specifically in animals. For example, blood, which is almost 99% water, provide a medium for substances to move around. Water is the transport medium in the blood, in lymphatic system, excretory system, digestive system of animal, and in the vascular tissue of plants. Here again, its solvent property are essential. Now we explain a high specific heat capacity. Let me define the term specific heat capacity. The amount of energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree. Let's suppose you have water and the temperature of water is 25 degrees centigrade. The amount of energy required to increase the temperature of this water by 1 degree is said to be specific heat capacity. The heat capacity of a substance is the amount of heat required to raise its temperature by a given amount. For example, the specific heat capacity of water is the amount of heat energy required to raise the temperature of 1 kilogram of water by 1 degree. The high specific heat capacity of water has important biological implication because it makes water more resistant to change in temperature. Okay. Now, high latent heat of vaporization. You know that water boils at 100 degrees centigrade, which is even a very high temperature. Therefore, more energy is required to vaporize the water, means to turn the water from a liquid state to a gaseous state. Okay, the reverse is also possible. For example, we can turn a liquid water to solid, but in that case the water has to lose lots of energy. The latent heat of vaporization is a measure of heat energy needed to vaporize a liquid, changing from its liquid to gaseous. In case of water, it involves the change from liquid to water vapors. Water molecules are stick to each other by hydrogen bonds, mean that a relatively large amount of energy are needed to vaporization to occur. The reverse is true when water changes from liquid to solid ice. This time the water molecule must lose a relatively large amount of energy, making it less likely the water will freeze. Now, density and freezing points. Water is an unusual chemical because the solid form ice is less dense than its liquid form. Okay, for example, when the water molecule turns from liquid to solid, empty spaces occurs or established between the molecule called hexagonal structure. It forms a hexagonal structure and just the inside of the hexagon become empty. This makes the ice less dense than liquid water. Before 4 degrees centigrade, the density of water starts to decrease. Ice therefore floats on liquid water and insulate or separate the water under it. This reduces the tendency for large bodies of water to freeze completely and increase chances of life surviving in cold conditions. High surface tension and cohesion. Water molecules have very high cohesion. In other words, they tend to stick to each other. Okay, cohesive forces are actually the forces molecule of water actually link with one another with the force. These forces are said to be cohesion. Water molecule can also stick to other molecule, okay, or other surfaces. Those forces are said to be adhesive forces. This explains why water can move in long unbroken column through the vascular tissue in plants. For example, in a transpiration stream, we studied that molecule of water link with one another in a continuous chain. Okay, just because there is a pulling force from upward, each water molecule pulls on another water molecule, on another, and so on. Okay, therefore a transpiration stream established from the top to bottom. High cohesion also result in high surface tension at the surface of water. This allows certain small organisms such as pond staker to exploit the surface of water as a habitat, allowing them to settle on or stake over its surface. For example, you might have seen that most of the creatures live on the surface of the water. Okay, they do not sink into the water just because of the high tension forces or the high surface tension of the water molecule. Water molecule on the surface are linked or are linked with one another so tightly that these molecules usually float on the surface of the water. Water is a reagent. Let me explain the term reagent for you. Reagent is any substance added to a chemical reaction to start the chemical reaction off. Reagents are usually not consumed in the chemical reaction, or a part of the reagent is usually consumed in the chemical reaction, not whole. Okay, for example, most of the people uses, or for example think or interchangeably use reactants and reagents, but they are completely different. Reagents are added to start off a chemical reaction, and reactants are consumed in the chemical reaction. Water takes part as a reagent in some chemical reaction inside the cell. For example, it is used as reagent in photosynthesis. In photosynthesis, water is used. Okay, a part of water, for example, hydrogen is used. Oxygen return back to the environment. During photosynthesis, energy from sunlight is used to separate hydrogen from the oxygen in water molecule. The hydrogen is then effectively used as fuel to provide the energy needed for the plant, for example by making glucose, an energy-rich molecule. The waste oxygen from the photosynthesis is the source of the oxygen in atmosphere, which is needed by aerobic organism for respiration.